Okay, Year 11s, just going to do some intervention on 2D arrays. Now, in order to help us with 2D arrays, we also need to have a little recap over just normal 1D arrays and also loops. So if I was going to write a loop from 1 to 10, okay, which will print out the numbers 1 to 10, the first thing I need to consider is when this loop will start, which is at the value 1, when it ends at the value 10, how it gets from the start to end, which is plus 1. Okay, and that allows me to kind of work out how to do the loop. So let's see. Okay, so how do we go from 1 to 10 using control loop? Well, we can do it with a while loop, and this is how you probably end up coding it in Python. So we have x equals 1, the starting point, equals to 10 is our end point, and then we've got plus 1, which allows us to go from the start to the end. So it gives us the number pattern 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 10. I could obviously use a for loop in the OCR reference language. Again, we can start at 1, we can go to 10, and this next x is the same, plus 1. Okay, so that's how OCR will write it in an exam. You can write your answers using the for loop as well. So obviously it just won't work in Python. Okay, so the one on the left is more Python version of it, and the one on the right is more the kind of OCR pseudocode-y kind of way of doing it. So a quick bit of revision on a 1D array. So remember, a 1D array will allow us to store multiple values inside a single variable effectively. In order to access each item, I need its index, and each index is just simply an integer number. So it starts at 0 and then obviously goes up in ones. Okay. The first item is in index 0, the second item is in 1. So Chris, the index of Chris is going to be 3, because that is the number it's at. So whenever we want to do something with an array and we want to maybe get a value out, or we want to update a value, we need its index. Okay, so let's say I accidentally want to change Tina to be, I want to change Tina to be Sarah. Okay, the code I would use is below. So I need to use Tina's index, which is the value of 2. And because I'm changing a value, I'm updating it, I'm assigning a value to it. So that's why I use the equal sign, and then I just change it to whatever value I want to. So in order to access a value inside an array, I need its index, and I also need the name of the array. In this case, it's names. So let's say I want to loop over each value in this array. Okay, so the index starts at 0. Okay, then we got 1 all the way up to 4. Now, I probably want to be able to create a number sequence 0 to 4. Well, that's very similar to a control loop we've just been looking at. So it starts at 0 and it ends at 4. Well, here I've got less than 5. I mean, I could easily go less than or equal to. 4 will do exactly the same thing. And then I've got the plus 1 there. Then obviously I can then adapt that to display each value in the array. Okay, and the only change I've made is put the name of the array and then in square brackets x. So what I'll do is the first time it loops around, x is 0. So names x, well, that's going to be Harry, isn't it? Okay, and then we'll add 1, so x is now 1, and then it's going to print out Halima, and then Tina, and things like that. Obviously, I can do that using for loops as well. So this is now the Python OCR reference language. Okay, and again, it starts at 0 to 4. Okay, and then it prints out the x. And then if I want to adapt it to print out the name of everything in the array, then I'll go names x instead. So we can essentially interchangeably use these. Okay, in Python on the left, in OCR reference language on the right. If you code the one on the left in the exam, you will still get full marks. Okay, so it's however you prefer to do it ultimately. So a 2D array is an array of arrays. Okay, so each item in the array is in itself a little mini array. Okay, so on the screen I have got an array called stamps. Okay, and the first item in index 0 happens to be another array with 2 values in, Monday and 5. Okay, then in the next index, index 1, we've got Tuesday and 2. In index 2, we've got Wednesday and 9. So each item in the array is itself another array. Okay, so that's a 2D array. We think of 2D arrays like a table. So here I've got the table version of the array on the left hand side. Okay, so this is just the way to think about it. So each row in the table is one array. Okay, can be represented as an array. So you can see this Monday is one array. The Tuesday is another array. So each row is like a mini array. So the way we have it, okay, is essentially the first array, okay, is basically which row it is. And the second arrays, so these little mini ones, are the values of the columns, okay? So each row of the table is like a small array. So each day, like Monday 5, and again, these also have their own indexes. Okay, so what's the index for stamp total? Is obviously index 1. So we have our rows, okay, and we have our columns. So let's say I create a variable called day, and I said stamps 2. Okay, well that's getting the third row out. Why the third row? Well, remember 0, 1, and 2. Okay, so Wednesday is the third row, but in index 2. So day equals stamps 2 will give me the little mini array of Wednesday, which is this one here. And then when we say day 0 and day 1, well, day 0 is going to be the first value, the first column essentially, which is this one, Wednesday. And then day 1 is going to be the second column. Okay. So to combine those together, I can do this. I can simply state which row and which column I'm interested in. Okay, so this one, stamps 1, 0, is going to give me the first row, which is Tuesday, and the first column, which is Tuesday. Okay, obviously. And then stamps 1, 1, well, it's going to give me the first row, second column, which is the value of 2. So this will print out Tuesday received 2. So each row is a little mini array of values. The first number represents the mini array we want. So we say it is a bit of a mouthful because that's technically what's happening, but to make life so much easier, we say row and column. Okay, what's the row, what's the column of the table I want to access? Okay, so the first number is the row, the second number is column, and just makes life a lot easier. So here I've got stamps 3, 1. Well, let's look at row 3, 0, 1, 2, and 3. So this is Thursday, and we want column 1. Well, remember 0 is going to be the name Thursday, and column 1 is going to be the number, in this case, the number 1. So we can use loops with 2D arrays as well. So this is probably one of the harder questions on the paper, but actually you have all the skills you need to be able to do it because it's just simply a counter-controlled loop. And we now know how to access a value out of the table. It's row followed by column. So if we look at this code here, print stamps 0, 1. Well, what's that going to do? Okay, well, row 0 is Monday. Okay, so that's, remember, it's row then column, and then 1 is the column, which is 5. Okay, so that's going to give me the number 5. If I did stamps 1, 1, well, row 1 is Tuesday, and column 1 is number 2. So that's going to print out the number 2. So next one is row 2, column 1. So row 2, column 1 is the value of 9. Row 3, column 1 is a value of 1. and then row 4, column 1 is going to be 0. Okay. So we can use a loop to go through this one because notice the column is not changing, but this row is. Okay, so it starts at 0 and ends in 4. So starting point is 0. My end point is 4. And in order to get there, I'm adding 1 each time. Okay. I'm doing the same thing each time, which is printing stamps row then column. The column is always staying the same, which is 1. So the thing that's changing, the only thing that's changing is the row starting 0 going to 4. Okay, therefore my loop would be a simple control loop. So this is it in a bit kind of Python-y. So starting at 0 and then ending at 1. Sorry, ending at 4. So remember, I could do less than or equal to 4 again, or less than 5. Both will do the exact same thing. And then if I want to add them all up, well, okay, slightly more complicated, but actually not too bad. I'm getting out the stamp total there. Okay. And I'm adding it to a variable called total. Okay, so total equals totals plus stamp value. Well, total starts at 0. So when this first runs, okay, it's going to get the value of 5 out. Okay, so stamps pos 1 is going to get the value of 5 because pos is 0. Okay, so row 0 essentially. And then it's adding on to total. Well, total is 0. So 5 plus 0 is 5. So total gets the value of 5. So let's just update it. Okay, and then I add 1 to pos. So pos is going to be 1. And it moves on to the next one. So then it says total equals total plus stamps pos 1 again. Well, pos is 1. So that's going to get the number 2 out. So stamps pos 1 is going to be 2. And I'm going to add that to total. Well, total is 5. So 5 plus 2 is 7. And then I just keep repeating that one. And what will happen is it will just get a running total of 5291. So add them all together, okay, which will give me 17. So that will be the final kind of number it will produce. But that becomes the looping code. So loop over it and adds up all the values in there. Okay, so the key to this one is there's only one value changing, which is the first one. Okay, so the row is changing, but the column is staying the same because I'm trying to add up all these numbers here. Therefore, the column stays the same, but what's changing is the row. Okay, and you can see that's going to create the same kind of pattern as what's shown on the screen as well. So here's the exam question on this one. It does look difficult, but again, look at the number of marks. It's 3 marks. So obviously they are aiming this one at the top end. It's a bit of a challenge, but it's not so bad because I need to write a loop, a counter-controlled loop. Well, we know how to do that one, okay? Because it's looping over 0 to 4. Okay, so looping over those days, and the column is not changing. So that's nice and easy as well. Okay, so it's staying the same. So it's just very similar to the code I showed you. Okay, so it's starting at position 0, ending at position 4. So I could write less than or equal to 4 because remember it does pretty much the same thing as less than 5. And then very similar to the code I showed you before, which is I'm getting the value out of the array. Well, I want student 0. Which is why I've got 0 there. The pos is changing each time because the day is changing. So 0, 1 all the way to 4. And I'm adding 1 each time because I'm going over each day 1 at a time. Okay, so that becomes the code for that. Okay, so this is the OCR reference language of it. So again, it's doing exactly the same thing. So I'm starting at row 0. I've changed the variable to be row instead of pos. Purely because I just think it's slightly more descriptive, okay, because I'm going over each row, so call it row. Starting 0, going to 4. Remember, it's for loop, so it adds 1 each time automatically, and then obviously I'm actually doing the work, which is hours played. Got that row, which is the thing that's changing, and I'm using column 0 because it's student 0, wasn't it? Okay, so that will give me the full marks on the exam, and I'm fairly certain this is what the mark scheme looks like without looking at it immediately. I'm fairly certain it looks something along those lines. So hopefully that was useful. Have a go at the 2D array exam questions. I have put some normal 1D array questions in there as well. They don't ask many 2D array questions, and the ones they do ask tend to be more along the lines of 1D array anyway, so it's not a thing to worry too much about. In all honesty, I think this is fairly straightforward. If you understand 1D array, 2D is fairly straightforward. Okay, so hopefully that was useful.